Good afternoon. In this video I want to deal with the issue of James 2 and how the faith works guys foul it up. And it's really not a complicated chapter. They take the view of the Roman Catholics, by the way, essentially saying that they just push it into the Old Testament. See, they want to make Old Testament salvation the same as Roman Catholics say Roman salvation is for us today. And we'll see here Gene Kim here talking about it. See how he avoids the real central issue of the issue is justification. What does it mean in that verse, verses compared to Romans? And the point that Paul is making is that there's two types of justification. That's the issue. What these guys want you to believe is that Abraham wasn't saved until he offered up Isaac, or he wasn't justified. They'll say he was saved, but he wasn't justified. You can't get saved without being justified. See, that's what they want you to think, these guys. You know, when they preach of faith works, they're telling you that a person gets saved, that they'll admit that he got imputed righteousness, but he won't be justified because they had something else to do, or God gave him a work to do. Ruckman would actually, this is Ruckman's teaching, by the way, this is not, this was, the James 2 issue was made simplified in the Schofield notes, when he made it very clear. It's an issue about testimony in James 2. Show me your faith. And if it's not producing works, it's a dead faith. But that's not dealing with salvation. These guys want to think James 2 is talking about salvation. It's not talking about salvation. They fouled up the entire issue by this whole faith works nonsense. So James 2 is not hard. It's not hard. It's not a hard chapter. If you understand the issue of sanctification, understand the issue that it's the same in both testaments. Once you get imputed righteousness, that's why he doesn't mention David. Blessed is the man who gets imputed righteousness without works. That's a prophecy. That's a prophecy. So let's see how these guys foul up James 2. And I'll hear all the Gene Kim people saying, "This is Gene Kim is a genius. He can never get anything wrong." But I tell you, we put these guys up here is basically because in most areas we agree with them. King James guys, dispensational guys, but they're fouling up a lot of areas. And the issue here is justification. They want to make faith works. Faith works. It's justification. It's justification. You go to Hebrews, you see the word testimony show up. They showed the heroes of faith gave a testimony, manifested their faith. They showed their faith. It was a testimony. Testimony to who? To the world. To the world. Showing their faith, what their faith produced in the relationship with God. So let's look at Gene Kim here and see how fouled up the faith work system gets you in the deal in James 2.
Because they will mess up right here with James chapter 2 and verse 24. James chapter 2 verse 24, very common passage. Basically, a lot of churches know that verse. It's basically by works. They say, you see then how by works a man is justified and not by faith only. So James 2:24, what it's showing right here is that there is faith and works. Now, Christians, because they believe salvation by faith alone, they have a problem right here. So, how do they reconcile this? This is a problem, all right? The problem is, because they think that this passage, when we believe in faith, alone without works, but then right here at James, when it says faith and works, they somehow mean the same thing. No, if you look at the words, that's not the same thing.
See, he's there who justified. That's the issue. See, he hasn't put the word justified up there. Faith and works. 2:24. See it then how that by works a man is justified and not by faith only. He hasn't put the word justified up. He's playing a con on you. This is a con job.
Amen. But this is how.
You got an amen out of that. The problem with James 22:24 is the word justification. How can you be justified in Romans 4, talking about someone being justified, and then talking about not having works, and then being justified in James 2 with works? That's the crucial issue.
They'll do it. So then they'll reword it, and they put it as this way. It is faith alone, see? No works.
Faith alone, which does what? Justifies you. I'm going to make this point again. You can't be saved without being justified. That's what they want you to believe. That Abraham was saved, got imputed righteousness, and God didn't say justified. He waited 20 years later. And then you get Rahab in there. She gets justified immediately. But it took 20 years for Abraham to get justified. Okay. That's what they want you to believe. See, I'm going to do a video later, an issue of just Lot. See, they have a problem with Lot. Lot's called just. He doesn't show any works. He was a saved man in Sodom. And what saved him was Abraham's prayers, not his own righteousness. He was about to get killed in Sodom as a saved man.
But this faith produces works.
And by the way, in his book, this is Gene Kim's book on dealing with Walkman, he doesn't even mention Lot. They have a real problem with Lot because it doesn't fit their theory.
You know what they're doing? They're just simply moving works right here to over here, you see?
He's got a thing up there, works and faith. Actually, it should be faith in the bottom and works up. It shows faith, works show your faith. That's how it is, a hierarchy. It's always a hierarchy. And that's how it's seen in Hebrews 11. People see your faith by your works. When the guys were putting a hole in the ceiling, they lit the paralyzed guy down. It said Jesus saw their faith. He didn't say he saw their works. He saw their faith. Why? Because he saw what they did, and it was showing their faith.
So that's a clever interpretation. You heard Ray Comfort, you heard Paul Washer, John MacArthur, and I guarantee you this, about 90% of the churches, sadly, they go by this method.
That's the Schofield notes. That's the normal way of looking at it. Justification in James 2 is talking about a result of showing one's faith. It is not showing. So the justification is God is now showing you, he's pleased with you, he's justified you, and man sees that. Because you're doing something that man can see. Your faith is active, it's working. It's a testimony to God. It's a testimony that people can see and say, this person's a Christian. They see that. And it doesn't glorify you, it glorifies God.
But this is a plain contradiction. Why? Because look at Romans chapter 4 and verse...
It's a contradiction if justification are the same. How they get out of that, they just want to put James in the book of Tribulation and take him out of the General Epistles for the church. That's how these guys do it. They want to claim not to be hyper-dispensationalists. They're taking the General Epistles and saying they're not for the church. Remember that when these guys are yapping at you.
5, Romans chapter 4 and verse 5. If you look at that passage, what did Paul say? He said that if you don't work, but you just believe, that faith is automatically counted as righteousness, salvation.
Salvation. See that? They're telling you these guys can get saved without being justified. You can't get saved without justification. And read verse 6. He doesn't read verse 6, does he? And even as David also described it, the blessedness of the man unto whom God imputed righteousness without works. Without works. So, and of course, how we know it's Old Testament? Because the sins are covered. Oh, it's a prophecy for New Testament salvation. Oh, no. It didn't say sins were forgiven or taken away. Expiation. It says they were covered. He says, this blessed of the man whose sins are covered. He was talking about Old Testament salvation. And his, under the law. Abraham before the law, David under the law. Same salvation. Different gospels. They had to believe different content. They had to believe something. But God was applying the cross to them the same way.
So it didn't just say faith. It said faith without works. See, that's what faith alone really means. It just means as
yeah, just like David says, oh Kim, Gene Kim, just like David said, without works.
It says, it means faith alone, without works. Look at Romans chapter 4 and verse 5. But to him that worketh not. See, let's say you don't work, but believeth on him that justifieth the ungodly. You only believe.
So this is all dealing with salvation. James 2 isn't speaking about salvation. That's what they want you to believe. These guys want you to think that James 2 is talking about salvation passages. It's not. It's talking about a walk. It's talking about the walk of a saved person.
But it's faith and works. Or it's faith that produce work. No, it says you believe, but you don't work at all. His faith is automatically what? Counted for righteousness. You see that?
And if you have righteousness, you're going to be justified. You must be justified with righteousness. God cannot, he sees his own righteousness, and he preaches righteousness to he's saved. So where's the justification talking about? See, now they're going to talk about Abraham not being justified until Genesis 22. Oh no, he's justified when he got saved. That justification in Genesis 22 was to glorify God. That was a relationship issue.
That much alone is enough.
That was a fellowship issue. The salvation was a relationship issue. This was a fellowship issue. It showed his fellowship. That's why he's called a friend of God.
So we got a problem right here. Well, it's not a problem because if you...
It's not a problem. You can go by the old Schofield notes and see it's not a problem. These guys have made it a problem.
Look at Romans chapter 1 and the first 10 verses. Who is it speaking to? It's speaking to the Christians, the called of Jesus, the church, right? You know that. But is that what it said at James 2? Look at James 1:1. James 1:1 told you who it was speaking to. J-E-W-S.
Yeah, scattered tribes of Jews. The first 50 years of Christianity was made of Jews. Book of Hebrews written to Hebrews, Jews. Still to the church. Still to the church. It's just the early church, before the mystery of the church was revealed. Just because the fact is written to the Jews doesn't mean it's not to the church. These guys want to take the General Epistles and throw them away from you. Just basically, they got, oh yeah, that's church age doctrine here, it's church age doctrine here. Oh no, that's church. General Epistles are to the church. The application of them might be in the tribulation as it gets in there, but he's going to show, because the word that church here, the last day shows up. Last day shows up in the day of Paul's epistles.
Right. Jews. It's at the very first verse, but you just jumped all the way to chapter.
We didn't jump out of anything. We understand church history. James is one of the earliest books. Hebrews is one of the earliest books. We understand the church was early Jewish. So that's who James is writing to, the early Jews, who were saved. The early church, Christians were first Jews, not Gentiles.
Chapter 2. See, it's Jews. Not only that, it showed you the time period. Look at chapter 5 and verse 3. Chapter 5 and verse 3. If you look at chapter 5 and verse 3, it's at a different time period. It's at...
See how they're taking your general epistles away from you? These faith works guys.
At the tribulation. Last days.
Got last days in the Paul's epistles. So what? So what? It shows up last days. You got the last days talked about by Paul.
It's talking about the last days. So this is Jews in the tribulation. You know why this definitely matches up? Because all you have to do is see, Scripture interprets Scripture. They all build upon...
You have to reject Scripture to believe what these guys say. You got to start twisting things. You got to deny just lot. You don't want to explain them. It doesn't show up anywhere. It doesn't show up in any of their works. Dispensationalism. I'll see what is well, Ruckman talked about just lot. The problem, isn't it? Because he's called just. Peter, 2 Peter 2. Let's see here. Just lot. Okay, you got 2 here. Lot is described as just, verse 7, righteous, verse 8, and godly, verse 9. He is a saved man in the Old Testament sense. Did he do any works? He didn't do anything. He didn't do anything. But you would never have known that had the Lord not revealed it to you in this passage. That's right. Because he didn't do anything. You know, their idea is every man, you know, they were given a work to do. See? Enoch's work was to walk with God. See, that's how insane these guys get to defend this idiocy. To listen to some preachers, you would think no one could do the things Lot did and get saved. Now he switches to the New Testament. See, but he could So he's talking about eternal security of Lot. Okay? He's talking about the eternal security of Lot. Lot did things that we'd say a Christian couldn't do and still be saved. And he's saying Lot did and was still saved. He just thought Lot was eternal security. Then the other thing was, he wasn't under the law. It doesn't matter. Because these guys, faith and works existed in the entire Old Testament. Lot stands as a type of a backslidden Christian who loses everything at the judgment seat of Christ. Now you would notice something about the word godly in reference to Lot, verse 9. When some fundamentalists talk about godly scholars, godly faculty members, and godly men, the word godly has is no particular condemnation, commendation. A saved man still on a source is just as godly as any faculty member of any Christian college, and probably more honest in regards to faith and belief in the scriptures. In other words, you're saying godly is losing this connotation. You're using a lot of these guys who call them godly. Point is, Lot was godly because he was a saved man. That was the point. So there you have Ruckman talking about it. See, they can't deal with Lot. These guys, that's it. It doesn't show James. Lot isn't in the heroes of faith in Hebrews 11. So they can't. Oh, you was a hero. You did stuff. Heroes of faith. You know, no, he wasn't. He was just like King Saul. King Saul went to hell. No, well, he went to hell. He went to Abraham's bosom, though. Saved man. That's what these guys want you to believe. Oh, they're slick. Oh, they you know, they try to do everything, get around it. But he's not telling you the key word here is justification. That's the issue.
Each other. Why is it? See, here's the question.
Now he's going to go to Revelation 7, Remember 14. He's going to talk about the Jews and because James 5:20. He's going to talk about the commandments. That's another big one. Oh, you have to obey the commandments in Revelation. Commandment shows up in the New Testament, in Paul's epistles. Circumcision is nothing, uncircumcision is nothing but obeying the commandments of God. Romans 13, gives the list of the commandments. We're supposed to obey the commandments. What? It shows our faith. It shows our faith.
Why does Revelation 7 mention about the 12 tribes of Israel, the Jews? Why does it mention that in the tribulation, huh? Unless, see, not only that, if you look at, why did Revelation 14 verse 12, why did it say, keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus? Yep. Why did it say commandments and faith? Because, see, it matches. What else?
We're supposed to do the same thing. Commandments, keep the commandments, and the faith of Jesus. In other words, the obligation of the Old Testament in the book of Tribulation, to show their faith, they will keep the commandments. The commandments of love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and love thy neighbor as thyself. That's the commandments. We're told to keep the same commandments. Not for the basis of being saved, but because we are saved. That's the royal law of liberty that James is talking about. We're not under the ordinances of the Ten Commandments. That we're under the royal law of liberty, which is summed up with love. Love sums up all the commandments. That's what Romans 13 is telling us. These guys flip out everything you see the word commandments and think it's the Ten Commandments.
See, that's why dividing.
Yeah, wrongly dividing.
It's perfect sense of the other scriptures. When you divide things rightly, everything will fit into place and make sense. But you try to harmonize this with this, you can't do it. That doesn't make sense. You divide it. See? It's that simple. It's this simple, and you don't have a problem.
Yeah, 1 Corinthians.
Look at their interpretations of
1 Corinthians 7:19. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing, but the keeping of the commandments of God. Okay, so the idea every time the word commandment shows up doesn't mean that you're keeping the Ten Commandments. These guys have to con you and lie to you. And that's the reality of it. The issue there, why so many Christians complicate James 2, faith and works. They want to put your General Epistles in tribulation. They want to take them out of your hands and think it's, and that's what the hyper-dispensationalists. They take the General Epistles and move them into out of the church age. The General Epistles are for the church. Don't let these guys deceive you. And they want to bog down Romans in James chapter 2. James 2 has nothing to do with anybody's eternal salvation. That's what this guy wants you to think. So that's what he teaches in this book here. That James 2 is a salvation, eternal salvation passage. Old Testament saints. No, he admits that Abraham was saved by righteousness as soon as he believed. So it can't be eternal salvation. What's that justification referring to? And even Hoffman says that. One is before God, one is before man. Justification before God is when you get immediately saved, and therefore you justify. He sees you, he imputes righteousness to you, and then he must say justified. He must justify you because he sees his own righteousness. The other justification now is your growth. Is your growth. The reason other guys you talk about, McCarthy, because they have Lordship salvationists. They can't figure it out. Their sanctification is one process. So they have as hard time with James 2 as this guy is having with James 2. All Ruckman and all these guys do is they simply just throw out James as being a church age epistle. That's their way of handling this. Oh, that's in Hebrews, like I say in Hebrews. Oh, that's not a problem with eternal security because there was no eternal security in Hebrews. He just admitted. Ruckman admits that Lot had eternal security. He admitted that in his note. These guys are all over the place. So don't be deceived by this faith works crowd. They're conning you.
James 2. All right, some of them go 3 pages long just on
Because they don't understand sanctification. All you have to do is look at the Schofield note. Schofield had it right back in 1917. He had the Schofield note. He says one's looking at salvation, Abraham and David looking at salvation, their justification, and the justification that came later for them was an issue of being seen. Rahab showed her faith. She was saved when she believed in God, the God of Israel. And then she showed her faith by hiding the spies. What is nonsense these guys put up? Well, the Old Testament, their faith wasn't like your faith, and they had to have a work in there, and God gave them work, and then he goes to the Enoch. You see what he says, Enoch? Enoch's work was to walk with God. That's how nutty these people are. They're nutty.
This little verse. Do you think that's what God intended?
No, God didn't intend it. You guys came in with your faith works and fouled up the entire system. The dispensational system had no problem with James until these nuts showed up.
So that's why dispensationalism is important.
Okay, we'll stop here. Again, James 2 is not a problem, except the fact that Lordship salvationists make it a problem, Roman Catholics make it a problem, and faith works guys for the Old Testament make it a problem. The Ruckman school, they make it a problem because they take James 2 and they make it a salvation, eternal salvation issue. Just like the Roman Catholics. All they do is that say, well, the Roman Catholics are right. It's just for the Old Testament. It's not for the church. That's what they're saying. That's what Hoffman is saying. That's what Ruckman is saying. That's what Gene Kim is saying. That's what Brian Denglish is saying. That's what Greg Miller said. If he's still saying it. All these guys on there, preach, King James guys, dispensationalists, but they've inserted a lie into the dispensational system regarding faith works of the Old Testament. And it's bled over into the General Epistles, where and also in the book of Hebrews, where instead of defending eternal security and dealing with the passages, all they do is say, oh no, there was no eternal security in the Old Testament, when they admit that Lot had eternal security. And he didn't do anything to be called just Lot. He was just Lot because he received his justification at the time of salvation. That's why he's called just Lot. Ruckman can't explain it. Gene Kim doesn't even have it talk about Lot. Doesn't even talk about Lot in his book. Either there's the other guy in dispensationalism, Walker. This is the guy. Let's see here. Find his book. The Bible believes God dispensationalist, Walker. You go through his index here, he doesn't talk about Lot. Make sure here. PL. I don't see him. Look through it. Name index. Let's see here. Nope, no Lot. Yeah, so can't deal with just Lot. Can't deal with him. He just proves the entire system. What these guys got to do is they go into General Epistles and say, oh, it's the Hebrews. That means it must be tribulation. Oh, it's the book of James. James to the Hebrews. Oh, it's the Jews. Oh, it can't be to the church. They're taking the General Epistles away from you. Those General Epistles are for us. They're explaining things in our walk, and of course they're written first initially to the Jews. The book of Hebrews is written by Paul to the Jews in order to get them saved, to tell them they had better things, not to go back to Judaism. So again, I'll get the screaming, ranting Gene Kim followers who, said this is a guy, he can make no mistakes. He's never wrong. He's following a faith work system for the Old Testament, and he's distorting James 2. James 2 is not about anybody's eternal salvation. It's about show me. That's the emphasis in James 2. Never a problem with James 2. If you understand justification, you understand what God is looking for in your walk, in the issue of sanctification. You're justified, salvation, righteousness, you receive justification by God at the moment of salvation. Then, growth is an issue of justification before men. Will men see your testimony? Hebrews talking about the testimony of these heroes. They gave testimony. They manifested their faith. So Buckman says the same thing. But when you're going to be involved with these faith works guys, they're going to foul you up. They're going to foul you up. And they got to twist scripture to do it. He brings in Revelation 7, Revelation 14. What does that have to do with anything change? It has nothing to do with that. He says, well, the word commandments will show up. Commandments. Well, Paul talks about keeping commandments. Paul talks about the last days. Those are not the basis of taking a general epistle and throwing out of the church age into the book of into Tribulation. That's what these guys have to do, though. All they did was say the Roman Catholics are right about James 2, but they got the wrong dispensation. That's what they're saying. They're saying the Roman Catholics are right. No one is ever saved by faith alone. That's the Roman Catholics. No one's ever saved by faith alone. What these guys say is, oh, the Roman Catholics got it half right. I'll put it that way. Got it half right. They were right about the Old Testament, but not right about the New Testament. So when it comes to New Testament salvation, it's by faith alone. But when it comes to Old Testament salvation, all those guys who preached against salvation by faith, you can't have faith alone because of James, they were right. They just got the wrong dispensation. So we're rightly dividing, and these guys just wrong dividing. So the Catholics are right halfway. No, the Catholics are never right. Because God doesn't operate that way. He doesn't put you on probation. You're saved. And then you walk. The difference is in different dispensations is what was revealed to you to believe in. That was the difference. Different gospels. But the basis of everyone's salvation was the cross. The application, what was applied to them, was always the blood in every dispensation. Because that's the only way you can be saved, is the blood being applied to you. That's what Romans 3 is talking about, going back and says, that is that the sins that were covered can now be permanently removed after the cross. But they were covered. And that's the whole idea. The basis of sacrifices, they don't remove anybody's sins. The basis of sacrifices was their walk. That's what the rituals that God put in place to set up a ritual system. And this is what you got to do now in order to. And in some sense, like with David, they didn't have any rituals. They basically was totally dependent on God just forgiving them. He had to confess that sin of adultery and murder. There were no payments for that. And so he couldn't go, he basically, that all the Psalms talking about him, Psalm 51, he's on the verge of being killed if he hadn't confessed that sin. But that's it. That's what these guys want you to believe. General Epistles are not for you, for the church age, and then they twist things. And he talks about why people are confused at James 2. People aren't confused by James 2. And when dispensation was never confused by James 2 until the Faith Works guys showed up and tried to just distort everything. Say, well, these guys, these Old Testament saints, they weren't really saved. They were saved, but they weren't justified until they had to show, until the. What are you talking about? The justification. They say he's saved. So what is his justification in? Justification is dealing with salvation initially with God. And Hoffman has this note there. It says there's two aspects. Two aspects of justification. One for God and one for man. It's that simple. It's that simple. They've made it complicated. Because when you twist scripture and you foul up dispensations, you're going to make it complicated. So they try to make it simple. Oh, well, we'll just remove the General Epistles from the church age. Well, General Epistles are for the church age. And James 2 is not complicated for the church age. It's an aspect of just sanctification. The same way we're sanctified before men. We're justified before men. By your testimony, your witness. If you're not producing fruit, no one knows you're saved. That's it. No one believe it. Now, you could be. You might be. But no one's going to believe you're saved. Just like Lot. No one believed he was saved. We don't believe what he said after, he's trying to tell his sons-in-law to get out of Sodom. They didn't believe him. They said, this guy's crazy. And your testimony's shot. No question about it. You're not going to get it back. Very hard to get it back once your testimony's shot. Very hard to get it back when people see you involved in things. That's being justified before men. But that's a saved man who's already been justified before God. And it works the same way in the Old Testament as it does in the New Testament. Don't let these faith works guys foul you up. Amen. Thank you.